Hello and welcome to Using Your Mobile Phone as a Camera. My name is David Taylor and I'm a landscape photographer based in Northumberland. The best camera in the world is the one that you have with you at the moment that you need it. As we all have mobile phones these days, this makes them great tools for capturing any photographic opportunity when it comes along. In this video I'm going to be covering the basics of getting started with a mobile phone, covering such aspects as setting exposure and colour, as well as using free apps that are freely available to enhance your pictures later. Today I'm using an iPod, but basically any Apple or Android phone or tablet will have very similar controls, so anything I cover today should be applicable to your phone. First though, let's start with the basics. I've got this very simple shot setup. The first thing to do is set the shape. One option is square, commonly used for social media like Instagram. However, I prefer to shoot with the standard photo option. This gives me the choice of cropping to square later if need be, but I like this rectangular shape, so I tend to stick to it. Next is focusing. Phones are clever and can recognise and automatically focus on faces. If a face isn't detected, then the phone will typically focus on whatever is closest. Often that works well. However, there may be occasions when this is not what you want. You would then need to move the focus box to the point where you want to focus. To display the focus box, just tap your finger on the screen once. To move the focus box around, just tap again in the desired place. If you want to hold focus, possibly to recompose slightly, just hold your finger down on the screen for a second or two. On my iPod, you can see the words AE AF lock at the top of the screen. This lets you know that focus is now locked. Just tap once more in the focus box to unlock and start again. Next, you may want to adjust exposure. Phones are generally excellent at judging the correct exposure, but there may be times when exposure is just plain wrong, or even that you want to adjust exposure to alter the mood of the photo. To adjust exposure, move the sun slider up or down to suit. Increasing exposure makes the photo lighter. This is called high key exposure and is great for romantic portraits or children. Underexposure darkens a photo and is known as low key exposure. This can create very moody and interesting pictures. Some phones have multiple lenses that allow you to alter the composition without needing to move. This iPod only has one fixed lens. This means that I have to physically move forwards or backwards if I want to make my subject larger or smaller in the frame. This iPod does have a zoom function however, but this lowers the resolution of the picture. This means that there are fewer pixels in the shot, so it will look rougher on the screen afterwards. To zoom in, pull your fingers apart on the screen. To zoom out, pull them back together again. I've got my iPod attached to a tripod, which is keeping it nice and steady. You may have a grip of iron and don't suffer from the shakes. Oddly enough though, just pressing the shutter button to take the photo makes your grip on the phone less steady. If your shots aren't always sharp, try turning on self-timer first. Select 3 seconds and then hold your phone in both hands until the shutter has fired. Another technique you could try is using your phone's burst mode. This is when the phone shoots multiple shots for as long as you hold the shutter button down. You can then look through the sequence, keeping the one that you think is the sharpest. Phones often have a built-in flash that briefly illuminates your subject when you take the photo. This flash isn't hugely powerful, so your subject needs to be relatively close to the phone. However, it's great for close-ups, particularly if you're in shade or indoors. To activate the flash, just tap on the lightning symbol at the top of the screen. Auto lets the camera decide whether to fire the flash or not. On turns the flash on permanently. Off turns it off. This last option is useful if you're in a situation where flash wouldn't be welcome, such as a wedding ceremony. Another option is HDR. Cameras can't record the wide range of tones that we see with the human eye. Often, either the shadows are too dark, or the highlights are burnt out. HDR or high dynamic range tries to overcome this problem to produce a more balanced picture. However, the results don't always look natural, and so it isn't always a good option. Personally, I'd rather adjust the exposure, usually making the image darker to retain the highlights, and then lighten it later. The final basic option we have is the colour adjustment. This lets you alter the overall colour of the photos you shoot. You can either make the photos look more orange and warmer, which works well for portrait shots, or bluer and colder. You can also make the colours in the photo look more vivid, as well as remove the colour entirely so that your photos are in black and white. There is no right or wrong answer to what you choose, it's very much personal preference. That was the basics of shooting with a mobile phone camera. Now that we're going to go into the aesthetics of shooting photos. This includes composition, colour and light. I'm in woodland, just 5 minutes walk from where I live, and I'm just going to have an explore around, see what I can find and then shoot. And I'll show you the results as I'm going around explaining what I'm doing as I'm doing so. Phones are great for capturing details like this. I love this textured bark here. With this kind of thing I like to get in close to produce very abstract images. Just looking for shadows, where the shadows are creating this sort of three-dimensional effect. That's quite interesting. I quite like these lines running down the tree here, so I might shoot some of this. And yeah, some of this lichen down here is very interesting as well. I love this sort of green texture down here, so I might do some of this. So yeah, have a look, see what I've shot now. Composition is the art of arranging elements in a photo to produce a pleasing whole. One element of that is whether you shoot horizontally or vertically. The temptation with mobile phones is to shoot vertically because that's the orientation that you typically hold a phone in. However, it's always worth looking at the horizontal option too. Quite often this can be dictated by the shape of the object. In this case we've got this wonderful fallen tree, very horizontal. So in this case I might be tempted to shoot horizontally. Other trees, obviously the ones which are growing vertically, would probably suit a more vertical approach. So think about the subject, what its orientation is and whether it suits being horizontal or vertical, and orient the camera accordingly. Composition is important with mobile phone photography as much as it is about sort of standard photography. One thing I like to do is get down to the level of my subject, whether that be a woodland flower in this case, or a child or a pet, just to see the world from their viewpoint. So quite often it means getting down on your knees, unfortunately, in the mud, but I've got my walking trousers on today. But yes, trying to find an unusual viewpoint, either from your subject's viewpoint or looking down on them possibly, just trying to stay away from the standard sort of eye level viewpoint, which is typically overused. So yeah, I'm going to sort of explore around here I think for a few minutes, just see what I can shoot with these wonderful woodland flowers, and yeah, hopefully we'll see what we'll come out with. Light is key to photography. Obviously you need some light to make a photo, but there are different kinds of lighting. There is what's called hard lighting, which is what we currently have at the moment, where it's a very sunny day today. So that means that we've got very bright highlights and quite deep shadows. This kind of lighting isn't ideal for mobile phone photography. Mobile phones can struggle a bit to record all the detail on the highlights and the shadows, which I mentioned earlier. So this is where you have to be really careful with exposure, making sure that you set exposure to record everything that's in the scene itself. The other kind of light, soft lighting, is what you typically get on sort of overcast days. So in terms of woodland, I actually prefer the softer lighting when there are less harsh shadows and less harsh highlights, which makes it easier to capture the full range of tones within the picture. There is actually a bit of cloud today and it's sort of kind of passing over and above my head as I'm speaking. So I'm going to hang around for a bit, see how the weather changes and see how that sort of affects the photos. But ideally, yes, I would wait until it was a bit cloudy for this kind of lighting, so that the lighting wasn't quite so harsh as it is today. Well, I've been here for a few minutes now and the weather isn't actually changing that much. The clouds aren't scudding past as quickly as I'd hoped. But just looking around, and quite often I'll actually change what I'm shooting depending on the light. Just looking around, there's actually a few opportunities which I hadn't spotted when I first got here. Yeah, so I've taken a few shots of this, but it's not really working that much. But I actually looked upwards, up into the trees themselves, and there are some really nice sort of shots of the, the branches in the sky against that really intense blue sky, which I think work really well. So we'll see what that looks like when we get back. But yeah, otherwise I'm just going to carry on looking around. Quite often I might look for shadow, oddly enough, I look for sort of shadow areas where the light is a bit softer and perhaps shoot details again, which I might go and have an explore now and see what I can find. Mobile phones are great for doing close-ups. The one problem they do have though is that the lens, the fixed lens, is typically quite wide angle, which means when you get in close it tends to create quite an exaggerated, distorted effect. I mentioned before about some phones that have multiple lenses. This enables them to kind of zoom in optically, which makes you can stand back from your subject, zoom in, and that creates a less exaggerated, distorted effect. Fortunately, like I say, this iPod only has one fixed lens, so I want to shoot these close-up of these phones, but I'm going to step back a little bit and use the digital zoom to zoom in to give me a slightly less distorted effect, which I think is going to be more pleasing. But obviously I'm going to lose some of the resolution by zooming in digitally, but I think that's going to be worth it just to get the shot that I want in this instance. One fun option which mobile phones have is panoramic mode. This basically shoots continuously for a short period to create a panoramic image, a long, thin or tall image, stitching those individual images together to produce the final panoramic. But it's very simple to use. Basically you just switch to panoramic mode, press the shutter button, and then smoothly move the camera in a nice sort of arc, either across or up if you're shooting a sort of vertical panoramic. Look for subjects which suit that particular sort of style of shooting. Again, very, very horizontal subjects. The tree that I was at before, where the trunk was very horizontal, works well. Or a vertical subject like a tower block or a building, something like that. Just something that suits that long, thin shape. I'm just going to shoot a panoramic now, quite like these leaves here in the this little area here. And again, we'll see what we can come up with. I'm shooting in shade here, and shade light tends to be very blue. So what I want to do is warm up the light slightly. So I'm going to select the colour option on the iPod and just scroll through the different options that I have. I think perhaps Vivid Warm is a bit too over the top. I quite like Vivid Cool, but perhaps not. Yeah, Dramatic I think works quite well. Dramatic Warm, possibly. Yeah, Dramatic, I think that looks good. And it's making these aesthetic choices that help you, create the photos that you want. Right, that's a few images saved to the iPod. Now it's a case of going home, I'll make a cup of tea, and we'll take a look at some of the post-production apps that are freely available for both Apple and Android phones. Once you have all your photos taken, you can then start to apply post-production to them, changing them into something almost completely different to how you originally shot it. The tool I like to use is Snapseed, which is a free app available for both Apple and Android devices. It's very simple to use. You can either use the presets that come with the package, which allow you to very quickly change a picture quite radically, or you can use the individual tools to fine-tune particular areas of your picture, including things like cropping and rotation. It's very simple to use, so once you've launched it, you just open up a picture, which we have here. And like I say, the first thing you can see is you have all these range of presets, including colour and black and white. Basically you just select one of the presets, like so, and it applies. If you don't want the preset, once you've chosen it, you just press the cross button and that reverts back to the original picture. I'm not keen on that. Having said that, I do like the black and white version here. If you do want to save the picture, you just check the tick there and then go to the Save menu. You have a number of different options, including Save a Copy, and this basically saves a copy of your picture with all the presets applied, which you can then undo later when you reopen the image up again. Or you can export the picture, and this now has baked in the changes into the picture, so you can't undo them later. So I've just reverted back to the original now. I've undone all the changes that I made previously. I now want to go to the Tools menu, and you can see here there's a range of different tools with different effects that you can apply to your picture. One of the simplest changes is just to crop the image. Some of the more interesting presets in crop are 16:9, and that mimics the shape of a high definition television, so that's the shape that you'd find on a modern television now. Another interesting option is 3:2, and that mimics the shape of an image that comes from a DSLR or mirrorless camera. So that's a slightly rectangular, not quite as panoramic looking as the 16:9 option. But I think I preferred the original crop. White balance changes the overall colour tint of the picture. So you can make a picture look warmer or cooler. Basically, to use this, you just drag the slider backwards and forwards at the top here. So dragging it to the left cools the picture down. Dragging it to the right adds warmth to the picture. But again, I think I preferred it just the way it was originally, so I'll just revert to that. But it is quite a useful tool if you find that you've been shooting in shade, say, and your pictures look quite cold and cool. Tune image allows you to affect the overall sort of brightness and contrast and saturation of the picture. And to use this tool, you'd move the slider at the top. So with brightness selected, you can increase or decrease the overall brightness or darkness of the picture. To change between the various tools, and there are several tools, you just basically swipe your finger up and down on the picture there, and that brings up the different options. Saturation changes the overall vividness of colours in the picture. So again, with saturation selected, you just move your finger on the screen to the right to increase the vividness, to make the colours look much more punchy, or to the left to make them look flatter and greyer until eventually there'll be no colour left at all and you'd end up with a black and white image. Another option I like is black and white, which takes the colour out of the picture, obviously. And with black and white, again, there are several presets to choose from, which all alter the look of the black and white picture. Post-production is largely about personal preference, and again, there's no right or wrong answer as to what you prefer, and what I prefer might be different to you, but that's, again, no right or wrong answer to this. So I personally like the more neutral options with black and white, but you can add things like grain to simulate a very grainy, gritty black and white photo, which I actually quite like, having just done that. Other options, and one of the things about mobile phone photography is quite often everything's pin sharp. Lens blur adds a bit of a softness to the picture, and again this can be varied, and again in combination with black and white, for instance. So I'll just select that, let that do its thing, and all these filters can be combined. So I'm going to combine it now with black and white, and I'm going to select the film because I did quite like the that gritty graininess. This is simulating an old, almost Victorian photograph, which and I quite like that effect. So again, yeah, it's very much about what you think is right for the picture, and just applying effects so that you get the kind of picture that you want.